champion swimmers, and they've been state champion wrestlers. They're Division I college football players, high school track stars, international quality water polo players. But what started to happen was, in the training, every single person got pushed past their mental, physical, and emotional limits. Every single person got pushed past their mental, physical, and emotional limits. What started to happen then was that you could see some people who've been incredibly successful before, had these wonderful resumes, these fantastic careers, but then once they got pushed past their mental, physical, and emotional limits, they started to think about themselves. And you could watch them as they started to think, I haven't trained for this, I didn't know it was going to be this hard, nobody told me to practice like this. And you could literally watch them start to collapse as they thought about themselves. There were other people who were in the training, and these are people who sometimes had trouble doing the 4-mile time runs. And the cutoff time, they had trouble doing the required number of pull-ups. But what would happen for them is they would say to themselves something that was very simple and very different. And what they would say is, you know what? There's somebody to my left who's counting on me, and there's somebody to my right who's counting on me, and I can find a way to be strong for them for 10 more seconds. If I can find a way to be strong for them for 10 more seconds, I can find a way to be strong for 1 more minute. If I can find a way to be strong for 1 more minute, I can make it for 10 more minutes. If I can make it for 10 more minutes, I can make it to lunch. What you started to see was that actually the strongest people in the training, the strongest leaders in the training, the people who were able to be of service to the people around them, were the people who, when things got really hard for them, they were able to step outside of their own pain and remember the fact that they had other people who were counting on them to serve and to lead with strength and with courage. It was that ability to step outside of themselves and to remember that other people were counting on them that helped them to become stronger. And I'll show you in a minute how we use that lesson in the work that we do with returning veterans today. Now, the pinnacle of SEAL team training comes in a week that some of you might have heard of. It's considered to be the hardest week of the hardest military training in the world. It's called Hell Week. And what happens over the course of Hell Week is that the average class sleeps for a total of 2 to 5 hours over the course of the entire week of training. And during that week, they've got you doing things like physical training on the beach with logs that weigh several hundred pounds. They have you running races with your teams in and out of the ocean. The water, in case you're wondering, you can head over, but regardless of season, here in San Diego, you head over to the beach at Coronado and you stick your foot in, you'll find that the water's often in the low to mid-50s. They give you plenty of time to appreciate the water. They have you running the obstacle course throughout the week. And it is a week of constant chaos and change and challenge and confusion. And one of the things that's so hard for people psychologically about the week is that you don't know what the next evolution is going to be. Not only do you not know what's going to happen later that day, you don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes. You don't know what you're going to be hit with. If you ever want to quit, all you have to do is raise your hand and say, I quit. Or you can raise your hand and say, I DOR, I drop on request. Or there's a small bell, and if you walk over to that bell and you ring it 3 times, it means that you've quit. Now, during Hell Week, the instructors would rig up this little contraption so that wherever the class went, the bell would follow us. And they said, we're going to try and make it convenient for you to quit. We're going to follow you around. We're going to make sure that that bell is never more than 30 or 40 yards away from the class. And if you ask the instructors why they do this, what they will tell you is they will say, we do that because we believe in excellent customer service. So they do. They follow you around with this bell as you're going through Hell Week. And I can remember what was, for our class, the hardest moment of the hardest week of the hardest military training in the world. And that moment came at the beginning of the second night. So for a lot of people, our adrenaline had carried us through the first night, carried us through the next day, and then we arrived at the beginning of the second night, and we were thinking to ourselves, I am more tired, and I am more exhausted, and I am more beaten than I've ever been in my entire life. I'm thinking, I cannot believe this is only the beginning of the second night. At which point you'd hear one of the instructors get on their bullhorns and say, that's right, gentlemen. It's only the beginning of the second night. And what they did then at the beginning of the second night was they took the class out and they lined us up on the beach to watch as the sun was setting. And as the sun was setting, the instructors came out and they got on their bullhorns and they started to get inside people's minds. And they started to say goodnight to the sun, gentlemen. We're watching the sun. Tonight is going to be the most painful night of your lives. And we're watching the sun. This week just gets more miserable as we go. And we're watching the sun. And I can remember I was standing there and I saw out of the corner of my eye that something broke in the class. People started running for the bell. Running for it. And you could hear it going off, ding, 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 ding. We had more people quit our class at that moment than quit at any other time in all of the training. This is what was amazing about that moment. I told you about all the difficult things that they asked you to do. They asked you to swim 50 meters underwater. They ask you to swim down 50 feet and tie a knot. They tie your feet together and your hands behind your back. They make you jump in the pool. Who would have thought that the hardest moments of the hardest week, of the hardest military training in the world, would come when all they had actually asked us to do was to stand on the beach and watch the sunset. But that's all we had to do at that moment, was to stand on the beach and watch the sunset. I told you we went from over 220 people down to 21. I could count on one hand the number of people who I saw quit when they were actually doing something. But what happened is people would quit when they started to think about how hard it was going to be. It's going to be so difficult. It's going to be such a hard night. I don't know if I can make it. And that's when people would quit. When people were actually doing something, when they actually started their evolutions, then they found a way to make it through. One of my favorite guys in my class was a guy named Eddie. Eddie was in my boat crew. And what Eddie would do every morning, he'd get together, we'd kind of assemble the class. It wasn't this big, but we'd assemble the class. Eddie would get in front of everybody at the morning muster and he'd say, "Hey, I just want to let everybody know that I'm going to quit today." Everybody would kind of laugh at Eddie and he'd say, "Hey, I'm going to quit today." He said, "But I heard that we're going to do a 2-mile ocean swim. You guys know I love swimming. I'm going to go do the 2-mile ocean swim and then I'll come back and I'll quit." No, we did the 2-mile ocean swim, we come back, and then Eddie said, "You know what, I was going to quit after the 2-mile ocean swim, but I heard that today they got burgers at the chow hall. You guys know I love lunch. I'm going to go get some lunch and then I'll quit." Go, we get some lunch, we come back, and then I said, "You know, I was going to quit after lunch." I said, "But I heard we're running the obstacle course. We always have a good time at the obstacle course. Let's go run the obstacle course and then I'll quit." Now, when Eddie would do this, it would have two effects on the class. The first effect was that for everybody who was really thinking about quitting, Eddie drove him nuts. just absolutely drove him crazy. But the second effect was that in Eddie's humor there was actually a little wisdom. And the wisdom was, for all these people who had made a decision that they wanted to make a change of course in their life, the wisdom was, there is no way for me to bring about this kind of transformation the next hour, or the next day, or the next week, or the next month. But if in fact I have decided with my heart that I'm going to set myself in this direction, and this is how I'm going to serve, and this is how I'm going to lead, then all I actually have to do is be willing to do the hard thing that's right in front of me. And if I do the 2-mile ocean swim, and then I come back, and then I run to lunch, and I come back, and then I do the obstacle course, and then I prep my rucksack for the morning, and I get my uniform ready, if I'm willing to do the hard thing that has to be done day after day after day, eventually I've changed who I am, and I've changed the way that I can be of service to the people around me. And what I learned about courage as I went through that training was that when I joined the military, I had a very immature view of courage. When I joined the military, I always associated courage with bravery. And I imagine that what happened was in some really difficult, dangerous moment, somebody who was brave would stand up and they might throw themselves against the odds and even sacrifice themselves in order to be of service to other people. What I learned actually going through the training is that the kind of courage that it actually takes to change who you are as a leader, to change the way that you can be of service to the people around you, is nothing that happens in a flash. There's never one moment when it all comes together. Instead, what we need is to set our hearts in this direction of service and then find a way every single day to live with the courage of perseverance. If we walk this path